Let's talk about the gun control laws that have been introduced since Newtown. We know on a federal level that nothing has been passed. Expanded background checks were defeated by a filibuster in the Senate in April. But on a state level, there has been some action. First, 5 states have now limited access to assault weapons or high-capacity magazines. Specifically, in New York, magazines have just been restricted to 7 bullets, and Connecticut has banned more than 100 various types of assault weapons. Also since Newtown, 11 states have expanded background checks for gun purchases. Richard, I want to start with you. Did Newtown change the game? And do you think that these laws that have passed will make these communities in these states safer?
Well, I think it was a game changer in many ways, but the impact, everyone says, well, we must do something. The question is always, what can we do that's relevant to the problem? Outlawing the future sale of certain capacity magazines and thinking that, boy, that's really going to stop this from occurring when there are several 100 million high-capacity magazines in existence today. We only have limited time, limited money, limited resources to do anything. And when we take our eye off the ball, none of the proposals suggested for passage in the Congress or in Connecticut had anything to do with Adam Lanza obtaining the guns that he did that day, committing that tragedy. When we talk about these tragedies, as Jill pointed out before, you know, when someone does have a gun and stops them, and it has happened, the tragedy is prevented or limited. So thus, we're not talking about something that didn't occur. It happened in San Antonio a few days after Newtown. It happened in a school in Alabama 10 years ago, where the principal ran out to his car, grabbed a gun, and stopped a worse rampage from occurring. So yes, it happens. Again, yeah.
Leah, I wanted to move on to you. Nationwide, we've seen a correlation between states with stronger gun laws and fewer gun deaths. For example, Massachusetts has some of the strictest gun laws, has only 3.4 gun-related deaths per 100,000 people. New Jersey, 4.9 per 100,000. On the other hand, Louisiana and Alaska have much looser gun laws, have a much higher rate, 18 and 17.5 gun deaths per 100,000 people. Is this trend due to the laws?
It's due to 2 things. It's due to gun laws that are strong in places like New York and Connecticut and weak in places like Alaska and southern states and some western states. But it's also due to gun ownership rates in these states. In Alaska, the gun ownership rate's about 60%. In New York, it's around 18%. So getting back to the point earlier that Richard's been making about guns protect you, which is just not true. Having a gun in the home, you're 22 times more likely to use it on yourself or someone you know or love, suicide, accidental shooting, domestic abuse, homicide, rather than to repel an invader. That's the data. So low gun ownership rates, having fewer guns in the home, and strong gun laws actually do end up protecting citizens of states with strong laws. In New York, we have the 4th lowest gun death rate in the country, and this is significant because we're a state of 24 million people, and yet we get 80 million visitors every year. Only California gets more visitors from outside of California than New York gets from outside of New York.
Ben?
So the fact that our gun death rate is so low is a testament to these 2 factors working together.
Thank you. Ben,
but guns are like pollution. They come over state laws.
There are a couple of issues here which are important. First of all, to the point that you know, lumping together violent crime statistics in terms of someone who is involved in a mass shooting versus someone who commits suicide with a gun, it's a little bit of a red herring, isn't it? I mean, if someone commits suicide with a gun, they could do the same thing by slitting their wrist. They can do the same thing by overdosing on pills. They can do the same thing by hanging themselves. Not to be too graphic, but
if I could just come in here. If I could come in here, guns are incredibly lethal. If you take poison, you have a 3% chance to kill yourself. If you have a gun to your head, your chances are nearly 100%. So, you know, a gun is a particularly lethal way to kill yourself.
But even if that's true,
New York City has the lowest.
Let's let Ben continue the
lowest suicide rate.
Well, I appreciate that, Leah. Let's have Ben hear his point. Go for it.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with that in terms of how lethal it is, but the reality is you can't lump those two numbers together. You can't say we have this epidemic of mass shootings going on around the country, which, by the way, you know, a number of folks like to say that it's an epidemic, and then also throw in statistics that deal with suicide, because suicide and mass murder shootings are not the same thing. But the other issue is, I want to go back to Jill's point that she made a little bit ago about hold on, but the other point that Jill made about preventing them, and Richard talked about this a little bit. There are many cases. The Clackamas shooting in Clackamas, Oregon, at the mall there, where a guy with a concealed carry weapon drew his weapon and pointed it at the shooter, who ultimately killed himself. You have that case back in the Appalachian Law School back in 2002, where a guy, two people ran into their cars and got guns. And so it's also difficult to say that that there's no evidence of guns preventing a mass shooting. We just don't hear about it. I mean, media does not talk about these things when they happen, and when someone does intervene,
it's
very
because they
rarely
don't happen that often.
Good points, everyone. I'm going to jump in here really quickly.
Even if it doesn't happen that often, they don't talk about it.
I'm going to jump in here really quickly, you guys.
Because it doesn't happen often.
One second, Leah. I'm going to talk. I'm going to move on to gun violence. Leah, we're going to move on to high-capacity magazines.
Real quick, just very quickly. Twice it happened. Twice it happened in the weeks around Sandy Hook, and no national media talked about it. Clackamas, they did not talk about, and San Antonio, they didn't talk about. They were within days.
All right, we're gonna talk about high-capacity magazines. Please let me talk, which are used to outlaw, which were used to be outlawed under the assault weapons ban. Let's listen to what Mark Kelly, the husband of Cappy Grifford, said about them in front of Congress.
It all happened very, very fast. The first bullet went into Gabby's head. Bullet number 13 went into a 9-year-old girl named Christina Taylor Green. When he tried to reload one 33-round magazine with another 33-round magazine, he dropped it. And a woman named Patricia Maish grabbed it, and it gave bystanders a time to tackle him. I contend if that same thing happened when he was trying to reload one 10-round magazine with another 10-round magazine, meaning he did not have access to a high-capacity magazine, and the same thing happened, Christina Taylor Green would be alive today.
Jill, I'm going to move on to you. Mother Jones looked at 62 recent mass shootings and found that in half of them, some sort of high-capacity magazine was used. Do you agree with Kelly's assessment that banning these magazines could save lives?
Of course, and we know that that's true. And when we talk about all the confusion about what's driving this, and what are the factors that can be controlled, it's really important to recognize that the reason we don't know, it's not just that the media is fairly useless, shall we say, but also the NRA made it a priority about 10 years ago to strip the funding from research on gun violence. So the reason we don't know has everything to do with the NRA's desire to just push ahead with their strategy, which is essentially a marketing strategy. It's a marketing ploy to sell a lot of guns, and and they've basically caused a blackout on information, that would guide this. But one of the best sources of information that we have is what Australia did. They had a Newtown of their own, a Newtown disaster in which even more people were killed, though they weren't children, but it was about 35 people who were slaughtered by a lone gunman. And within 12 days, it took them 12 days to pass a comprehensive legislation to control gun violence that included high-capacity guns. It also included automatic and semi-automatic weapons.
We have about 30 seconds left, but I wanted to get one quick response from Richard, former NRA lobbyist. What do you think about her statement about the NRA?
Well, the NRA doesn't sell guns. The NRA has always defended the right of America's civilians to use guns lawfully and responsibly. The issue of the T-Art Amendment, that's what Jill was referring to, is a little controversial. I'm all in favor of research, but I'm against using tax dollars for political research that's predetermined, and that's what was going on with the CDC prior to that legislation.
That's ridiculous.
Thank you so much.
That's not true at all, Richard.
We're going to take a quick break, you guys.
That is false, Richard, and you know it.
Coming up, you guys, we'll take a quick look at what it means to be a responsible gun owner and examine what other factors could be breeding the epidemic of gun violence. Stay tuned.